Good afternoon. Well, we still have snow on the ground, which is becoming ice. And at the suggestion of one of our online friends, I've ordered cleats in a way that you can attach, but they haven't arrived yet. So I'm going to have to watch it or I'll end up on my keister. And we all know that's not a good idea, especially now that it's not this fluffy, comfortable snow. So 26 degrees again, no wind to speak of, so that's good. And the same kind of nonsense seems to be going on in the stories. There's been a couple of stories about the Carroll trial, that is the trial in which he was both attacked and then years later defamed by Trump. And she's already had one proceeding, as you know, which has basically found that her assertions were true. And there's a trial going on now before a jury to determine what penalties, if any, Trump should pay her. And so they look at things like contrition, how she suffered in terms of public relations. That is, since she was a somewhat public figure and a writer, and she alleges that it suffered because of this tete-a-tete with Trump, in which he did what he did and then denied it and denied knowing her and all those things. Now, counsel who is questioning her has been remonstrated by the judge somewhat repeatedly yesterday and apparently today, according to reports, for, I don't know if there's a polite way to say it, just not knowing how to ask questions. And the judge gave a tutorial at a break without the jury being present how to do that. Now, the method by which one introduces evidence is the tools of a trial lawyer. And sure, sometimes the rules may change and so forth, but what she's doing is very basic stuff she's getting wrong. And today, she decided to ask whether or not Carroll had put sexually explicit material online. And the judge cut off that line of questioning. I don't know if he instructed the jury. So we have in the courtroom a person of questionable ability to be conducting this examination in this trial. And you can be safely assured, even if you go back to your Perry Mason days or modern trials, that the sequence of questions and how you ask them and what is admissible and not are not just a way to reliably get information from the witness, but they are also an indication to the jury whether the lawyer knows what, in this case, she is doing. So we have that in the courtroom, and I think that Trump is going to pay for this because don't you think it's cringeworthy when Trump is speaking loudly in a courtroom so the jury will hear him disputing the evidence without testifying or making a statement himself, although that may come, I suppose. When I became an assistant U.S. attorney, federal prosecutor, after having clerked, the first day I was sworn in, I was very luckily, because that's what I wanted to do, assigned to help a guy named Ira Lee Sorkin, a great trial lawyer, in a securities fraud case. And I watched one of the defendants sort of making comments as things were going on, which were akin, although I hadn't seen enough of this at that time, that are akin to what Trump is doing. In other words, going, how is that? Mumbling loud enough for the jury to hear the person on trial dissent. And the judge usually clamps down on that, and it wasn't excessive in the case I saw. And probably counsel, as in the good old days, you'd say, no, you can't do that. That's not how we win a case, and it can be how we lose a case. So Trump has been doing that, and and stuff like that. And before a New York audience, which is what the jury is, I just don't know what he thinks he's doing. But that's his bet. That's how he's laid down his bet for this case. That's how he's trying to circulate to the world beyond his campaign by defending court cases civilly and criminally. And that's him. Now, what can you say about it? On the world stage, the United States struck the Houthis again, their targets. And there's more talk about Iran. They're not saber wrestling, but they're complaining and so forth. Other kind of local news, which seems a little heavy-handed, is the prosecutor has released information that in the gun case where Biden's guns were kept, or gun was kept, there was traces of cocaine. I don't know what that means. Yes, I know what traces mean, but what level are we talking about? Years ago, it was embarrassing to learn during a drug case that there's so much cocaine that sometimes ordinary money will pass for having strains of drugs in it. So I don't have the details. I don't have the lab report. I don't know if the lab report is accurate given the heavy hand in that case. And I hate to be sounding like we can't trust the people involved when it's the other side. But, I mean, let's face it. The attorney who's prosecuting Biden, drove an agreement into the ground under political pressure, and now is going after him for what he admitted and they had a deal about. So that's a little discouraging. And how you alert the press to say, I just filed a thing today alerting the other side of this. So you get a little concerned about that. There's also an initiative among the Trump people to go into court and try to overturn or modify the prosecutions of those people who were the insurrectionists on January the 6th. And one of the things that they're focusing on is whether or not the charge obstructing a federal proceeding is valid in this case, because the question is whether or not a certification comes within the term of proceeding. Well, if that's all you got, of course you never know with judges, but this would be an issue they'll take to the Supreme Court. And so we have the 6-3 question there, which is the 6 right-wing political hacks. Roberts has quickly acceded to that reputation as well by the fact that he doesn't protest and gives license to the other members of the court who seem to be paying back what they got by arriving at the court. Reaching back to, it's not old news, but it's older news, and it's about Uvalde. You may remember that the police showed up quickly at the scene but did nothing. And that's the subject of a report that says it's an unimaginable failure. And I don't know what's going to happen to the people. The report may precede a criminal prosecution or nothing. And I've reached a point where I can't even hear Garland speak, our Attorney General. Because if we don't bring down Trump by the things that he did wrong, and I'm open to the fact that he might be legitimately acquitted, but you have to be from another planet not to have heard and seen the evidence and to have lived through it, watching it on TV, and to have seen the 1,000 or so prosecutions of those in the insurrection. So if Trump gets away from this, and heaven forbid, he becomes president again, one of the persons principally responsible, and I understand Jack Smith tried to rebut this, and this is in my mind, if true, the biggest error, and maybe the only error of what I've seen of his performance as the special counsel. But Garland is responsible for blowing away 2 years that could have been an investigation and would have been early enough not to put Trump in a more favorable position of saying, hey guys, I'm running for office. So that's another, well, arrow in their quiver, if you will, I suppose. There's an assault on the prosecution in Georgia because we have Willis and Wade are identified as the WW couple that had a relationship that might either have a conflict or fraud. I don't know what the fraud would be. I gather that it's along the lines of, why'd you pay him so much? You only paid him not because he was worth it, but because you were friends, intimates, I don't know. And I feel for Willis because I think this is a separate chapter, and if it's wrong or embarrassing or something like that, I really don't think it has anything to do with the work that they've done in the case. Now, we get to find out whether I'm right or wrong, and other people who are observing it, because the judge is requiring papers in response, and there'll be a hearing on the matter. To my money, I thought that she basically played too much the victim when she was answering the charges. And this is natural, and I don't know if she's had to defend herself before, but you're almost always the worst person to defend yourself because of your stake. And that's why you see when some public figures are challenged, others come out, proxies, to explain why the charges are false. I did an interview with for 60 Minutes, and Michael Wallace broke the interview down into two parts. And the first part was about an investigation I ran that basically said information about our labor secretary, Ray Donovan, had been withheld, that he had a mob association. And we went through that. The senator who appointed me was Orrin Hatch. It's on the Labor Committee. And I issued a report, or I should say the committee issued a report I prepared under the direction of the chair of the committee. And so I was interviewed about that because after that, Donovan was tried in the Bronx. And I also became not a special counsel, but an assistant district attorney to help obtain the evidence that the feds had for the state prosecution. Okay, that said, now the second part of the interview after a break, and you've seen these 60-minute interviews, the camera is right up on your nose. And so that was true in this case. And the second part, the first part went on for, I don't know, an hour or so. And the second part went on for almost the same time, but it was very different. Wallace was asking me, oh, what about this? What about that? You're a Democrat, does it influence you? And so on. And we finished and we stopped. We're just having conversation. And Mike Wallace says to me, did you notice how your answers were longer in the second part? And I said, you're right. And that's because I was being defensive. He said, yep. I said, well, I'm not going to do that again. Meaning, I'm going to be sensitive to the fact that you're defending yourself if you get in that situation. And you should trim your sails, so to speak, because the lady does protest too much, methinks, is equivalent to suggesting by your sensitivity that maybe you were wrong. And so now in the airing of the 60-minute episode, none of this, he legitimately had to ask the question because it was unusual for a Republican senator and a Republican administration over a nominee who was appointed by Reagan to head up the Department of Labor. So it was a legitimate question, and I was being too sensitive, shall we say. So I'm walking on a trail that doesn't have many trees because I thought this would be safer since I don't yet have my cleats. And so far it's been good. I haven't fallen off while I'm talking to you, nor before, and I hope after I get off the phone with you, or off the camera with you, if you will. So I say, welcome from the plains of Northern Virginia, and I hope I'll be out tomorrow to talk to you. Bye-bye.